Guten Tag. Ich heiße Kerry-Anne und ich komme aus Südafrika. Ich spreche aber nur ein bisschen Deutsch, so that is where we are going to stop, because my grammar is very bad, and if I carry on, it's just going to get embarrassing. For all the people in the audience who don't speak German, all I really said was, don't the English-speaking people in the audience look wonderful today? So, I'm an independent content strategist. And that means that I work with a large variety of different organizations. I work with government, volunteer-run organizations, startups, and so on. And all of these organizations have a lot of different kinds of challenges, different problems that they're trying to solve, different things that they need to face. They're working in different situations. But there's one thing that they all have in common, though. And that thing is that they're all consisting of people. People like you, and people like you, and like you, like you. People who have needs and fears and vulnerabilities, struggles, agendas, passions, personality quirks, past experiences, motivations, history, prejudices. People are complicated. Has anybody seen the Lego movie? The Lego movie? Yes, good. Because when I was in Frankfurt 2 weeks ago, I saw a poster for the Lego movie, and I really wanted to go and see it in German for one reason, because I wanted to hear the song. I wanted to know what Everything is Awesome was going to be in German. My guess was, Alles ist ausgezeichnet. Right? What was it? Can someone tell me, please? Oh, it's English. Damn. All right. But we're not like Lego people. We don't just fit together in very simple ways. We don't click together. We're complicated. We're squishy. We fit together in very complex ways. We affect one another in complicated ways and in ways that we often don't realize. We interact in difficult ways, and we cause reactions in one another often without realizing it. So what happens when we start a project? Let's take a website project, because that's a very common thing that we can probably all relate to. We're producing a new website. And we have a kickoff meeting for this website. We sit down together around a boardroom table. And the team comes together, and what do we talk about? We talk about what our skills are, what skill sets are we bringing to this project, what knowledge are we bringing, what can we do? Well, I'm a content strategist. I can do content audits, and I'm going to put together some term lists and messaging and so on. Perhaps do some information architecture, those kind of things. We talk about that. We talk about our experience. What projects have we worked on before? We talk about our objectives for the project. What is it that we want to achieve? We discuss all these very concrete things. What we don't talk about is our weaknesses. We don't talk about the fact that we have trouble dealing with deadlines, perhaps, or perfectionism. We don't talk about our hang-ups and our emotional history, the things that have happened to us in the past that cause us to respond in certain ways to situations. We don't talk about our hidden agendas. And the problem is that all of these things affect the success of our projects, sometimes more than the tools that we choose. Depending on the size of the project, the size of your organization, the scope, the size of your team, this can really have a bigger impact than what CMS you choose to use. So let's have a look at how we can deal with some of these things. Let's look at some practical things first. Things like tracking people on projects. How do we keep track of people? And how do we get the information that we need? So as I said before, I'm a consultant, so naturally my approach is born out of being a consultant and the way that I approach my work, which means that I'm often an outsider coming into an organization. As an outsider, I don't know anybody there, and I have to get to know them very quickly. So I don't know a lot about them, and I need to get a lot of information very fast. But I think that a lot of these things are equally applicable if you're working in-house. You may have to switch teams sometimes. You may need to work with people you've never worked with before. You may need to be working with new stakeholders that you haven't worked with before, and so on. So try to apply this wherever you can. So the first thing that you need to do is keep track of people. One of the things that I've realized, come to notice, is that in my own work, when I keep track of people, I don't see the team that I'm working with, or the team that is working on building whatever product or campaign or project, whatever it is that we're working on. I don't see those people as a separate group to the stakeholders that I'm getting information from. They're kind of all one group to me, and I track them together. And I think this is perhaps an important thing to bear in mind, because something that we've started to notice increasingly in the content strategy industry, and I've spoken to a lot of my associates in the industry about this as well, is that if we don't get stakeholders really, really involved in this process, they don't feel like they own it, the work that we do is not sustainable. So see the stakeholders that you're working with as part of the team and track them together. Just they're one big group. So team members, stakeholders, they're all the same thing. You don't need to use some kind of fancy CRM tool for tracking people. You can if you have one and you're comfortable using that. You can use an Excel spreadsheet. That's what I do. That's kind of what the spreadsheet might look like. I've simplified this a lot for the purpose of this presentation. You can track plenty more stuff than I usually do, depending on the project and what I need to keep track of. I might track things like what documents I need to get from different people. Obviously, if you need to contact people in multiple ways, you'll keep track of different contact details and so on. So what sort of things do you want to keep track of? Well, the simple facts that I showed in the previous slide, like who are they and what are their email addresses and what are their job titles and so on, sure. But you also want to keep track of some other things, like your impressions of them. How do they strike you? What kind of people are they? What personality traits are you picking up? How are they? What sticking points are they? What kind of things could become problematic in your relationship with them and their relationship with the rest of the team? What agendas are you perceiving they might have in this project that could become a problem later on? What are their particular interests? What are their concerns? What particular challenges do they keep mentioning over and over? Take note of those things because they could be really useful later on. So here's another example of some of the things that I might track. So for example, the top one is an example of something that actually happened where somebody told me that the person who brought me into the project told me that a particular person was responsible for a particular piece of work. And when I went and spoke to that person, they said, I've never heard of this. I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't do that. So not only do I have the problem now of figuring out who actually is responsible for that piece of work, but also there's the question of how did this miscommunication happen? How did person A think person B was doing this when they actually weren't? That speaks to a bigger problem in this organization that we need to solve. Why are these miscommunications happening? So things like that are really important to note because you might start to notice patterns and trends later on that you can address. So I note everything like that and people that are defensive, people that don't want to talk to me. Why is that happening and how can I start to deal with those things? Now, if you have a look at the kind of things that I'm tracking there, it's going to become very clear very quickly that a document like this is for your eyes only. It's really important that you need to maintain trust if you're going to keep this sort of thing. I've had clients ask me for a list of the stakeholders that I've spoken to. Can we please see, who have you been dealing with? I will strip out all of that information, of course, and give them the bare list because you cannot break trust. If you're speaking to people and they're telling you things that could potentially jeopardize their relationships at work, you need to absolutely maintain that trust. You can never show this to anybody else. Whoopsie, I clicked a little bit too zealously. If there are two things you're going to take away today, this is number one. Do one-on-one sessions. I'm still amazed at how many content people and other people in similar disciplines are doing only workshop and meeting group type sessions to try to get information in the organizations that they're working in. You are missing so much. There is so much information that you're not getting if you're only doing group sessions. I assure you, you're not getting the whole picture. You'll be amazed at how much people will open up to you when you sit with them in a room and it's just the two of you and you can start talking to them and asking them questions. They will open up to you. It is really, really, really astounding if you can create an environment of trust. So, and again, that comes back to why you should never break that trust. If you've created that environment and they start to open up to you, you cannot break that trust. So you will pick up cues, you will pick up things in meetings and in workshop sessions, but you want to go back then and take those into one-on-one sessions and start to investigate those things. Why did person A say this to person B? What is going on over here? How can I investigate what this relationship is about? What's happening? What's the undercurrent about? What's actually going on in this situation? And the only way that you're going to get that is by doing one-on-one sessions. You will sometimes find also that people want to bring their colleagues along. Try to diplomatically suggest that they don't. I've had to do that, especially in government. It seems to be very typical thing. People will bring their 4 colleagues along to the meeting that you've only invited one person to. Find ways of getting that to not happen. When you have these one-on-one sessions, these are the kind of questions you want to ask. What are your processes and tools? What's working for you? What's not working for you? What does your team look like? How many people are on it? Who's working with you? What kind of things are you doing in that team? What other teams and departments do you work with? Who do you need to deal with? Who do you need to get information from? Where are the problems with that? Who are you struggling to get information from? Where are the bottlenecks? Where are things getting slowed down within the organization? And what are your challenges? What things are you battling with? The kind of questions that you don't really want to be asking at this point are things like, what are your business requirements? What functionality do you need? What buttons do you want on the admin panel? Because you're wasting a brilliant opportunity to get really, really good information out of people. Think of it this way. If you had half an hour to spend with your favorite author, would you want to ask them questions like, where were you born? And what date were you born on? No, you'd want to ask them really deep questions about what they think about life. Because one-on-one time is really valuable. So make the most of it. Don't ask for a laundry list of requirements. I've seen this too often where people just ask for that list of functional specs. This is not the time to do it. You can work that out later. Really, really, you want to use this time to interrogate motivations and understand people. And then my favorite sentence of all, which for those of you who know of Christina Halverson, she wrote Content Strategy for the Web. I first heard about the sentence from her, and she's in the next slide. Tell me more about that. This is a beautiful sentence that you can use all the time. No matter who you're interviewing, no matter who you're speaking to, it is such a useful thing to say. Somebody says something that you find interesting, and immediately you just follow it up with, tell me more about that. Because it is such an open-ended question or statement, phrase. It just gives them the opportunity to keep talking, because suddenly you've opened it right up for them. And let them feel a little bit uncomfortable for a moment, leave a moment's silence, and they will start to talk and tell you more. And it's amazing the things that you learn following that sentence. All right, let's move on to puzzle time, because that's what you're here for, right? Look under your chairs and get your crossword puzzle books. No, I'm kidding. There are no crossword puzzle books, unfortunately. That would have been fun. I like crossword puzzles. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a few hypothetical situations. Actually, let's go back to that before you read that slide. We're going to look at a few hypothetical people that you may encounter. And these are loosely based on situations that I and some other people that I know in the content strategy industry have encountered in their work and in my work. These are not real people. So to any of my past clients, these are not about you. But they are based on certain scenarios. And the idea of what is going on, you'll see what we're going to look at is observed situations, and then perhaps what's driving those situations. What is making people behave in this way? And those things are things that I've theorized about. Why people perhaps are behaving in the way that they are. Those are theories. Of course, I can't know what's going on inside people's heads. So let's look at some hypothetical situations and people and work through those. Whoops, I don't know why I'm pointing there. So the first person is Tori. Tori's the marketing manager, and the situation here is that she brought you onto the project, firstly. So that's your relationship with her. Tori has a tendency to over-communicate with you, and by that I mean that she sends you a lot of emails, even when everything is going perfectly fine, just to check that everything is going perfectly fine. And then she also calls you on the phone just to check that you got her email because you haven't replied, and it has been 2 hours. And she just wants to check that everything is going perfectly fine. She's very worried, always. She also has this horrible habit of you'll get together, the two of you, and decide you'll discuss something at length, and you will come to a decision together. And then, later on, when her boss is in the picture, who's the CEO, and the boss shows that she's not keen on the idea, Tori will go back on the decision. And you'll be left looking like a fool because you had made this decision together and now she's gone back on it. So she doesn't back you up in front of her boss. She also keeps you away from her boss. So she's cut off that communication. So you can never quite actually get close enough to the CEO to defend those decisions and recommendations, to her yourself. So this is a tricky situation. So what might be going on here? Oops. Well, the first problem is that Tori feels that her boss doesn't respect her, and she's actually quite right, because her boss doesn't really trust her to do her job properly. Tori also doesn't know how to defend her own ideas. She doesn't really have the confidence to be able to defend her ideas. So she doesn't mean to leave you looking like an idiot. That's not her intention at all. She's not a bad person. She really doesn't mean to leave you looking like a fool when she backs down on those ideas that you've agreed on. But she has no idea how to actually defend them. So she's lacking in confidence. She's also afraid of losing her job, and the reason for that is that she comes from a traditional marketing background and not a digital background. So she's feeling a little bit out of her depth here, because suddenly all this digital stuff is around and she feels like she doesn't know enough. So she's out of her depth and she's really afraid. So that's what's going on. What can you do to help? Well, one of the things you can do is give her as many digital resources as you can, so that she's learning for herself instead of always feeling reliant on you, because she needs to build up her own confidence so that she doesn't just have to trust what you're saying. Because if she can build up confidence in her own decisions, she's that much more able to defend them to her boss when the time comes. The other thing is anticipate that those ideas that you have agreed on in advance are going to pick up objections from her boss. So discuss ways to defend them beforehand. Anticipate it and discuss ways in advance. And then also make sure that she knows you respect her. Give her your respect. All right, let's move on. Felix. Felix is the business analyst. The problem with Felix is that he's really inflexible. So he asks you for inappropriate deliverables, even when the project's clearly changing and you need to make changes based on new information that's come to light. There have been shifts in the project, you need to change scope perhaps. He still keeps asking you for things that don't make sense to you, and he values deadlines over progress. So he wants to stick to the project plan, because the project plan is everything, even when you really want to do good work. He hides behind the process and the project plan, right? What's going on? The problem is that Felix doesn't actually understand web content management. He's a business analyst, but he doesn't understand the domain of the project. And this is making him afraid, because if he deviates from what he knows, which is business analysis, he understands his processes, he understands his documentation and his business requirement specification documents, he knows those, but he doesn't understand what you do. And if he deviates, he's going to be shown up, and everybody's going to see that he doesn't actually know what this project is about. So that's the problem. What can you do to help? Communicate frequently. Make sure that you talk to him all the time. And then set up additional sessions with him to work through the subject matter, so that he actually does have an understanding of the domain and what it is that you're working on and what the project is really all about. Sharon is the head of customer care. You've noticed that in meetings, she often sits and sighs and rolls her eyes when recommendations are made, which is interesting. And you hear her saying, whenever somebody says something or makes a recommendation, she says, "I've been saying that for 4 years already." And she seems really, really put out by this. So what's going on? Well, she has been saying it for 4 years, and that's the problem, and no one's been listening to her. And suddenly, you've been brought into this project, and you're saying the same thing she's been saying. And who hasn't been in this situation where they've been telling somebody something for 4 years, and suddenly somebody else comes along and says the same thing, and they listen to them? It's a very frustrating situation to be in. So she feels that she hasn't been heard in the past, and she's not going to get the credit that she deserves. And now she's being sidelined by this new project, and she doesn't own the new project. Somebody else owns this project, and she's been sidelined by it. So this is a really frustrating situation for her to be in, because she's not getting the credit. What can you do? Well, the first thing to recognize with Sharon is that she's a really valuable person to get on your side, because she already cares about this project. She's been caring about it for 4 years, so she can be a really valuable ally. You want to get her on board really quickly and turn her into an ally. This is the person you want to be having meetings with, one-on-one all the time. And make sure that she knows that you know that she gets it, and that she has been saying this for 4 years. Make sure that she knows that you hear her, and then give her credit for those ideas in front of the other team members. because that's really what she needs. She needs validation. She needs to know that somebody hears her and that somebody notices that she's been saying this for 4 years. Let's look at Carl. He's the digital editor. He's worked at this organization for a very long time. In fact, he helped to build the current version of the website, the one that we're busy replacing. You can see where this is going, right? He seems uncooperative, and he takes a very long time to submit work all the time. What's happening? Well, naturally, he feels threatened by all the negative attention on the current version of the site, because basically we're all sitting in meetings picking apart the thing that he helped to build. And you know what? He and his team probably did the best that they could at the time with the tools that they had and the resources that they had, but he doesn't have the means to say that. There is no platform for him to say, but we really tried, and yes, I know the website is terrible right now, but we tried our best. We did the best we could. So he feels really threatened by that, because it's embarrassing to have people pick apart something that you worked on. So he tries to hide from that. And the other problem is that he's struggling with perfectionism, and that's why he's submitting his work late all the time, and that's why he seems uncooperative, because he doesn't like to show his work until it's completely done and perfect. So what can you do? You can take time with him to understand the past challenges in the history. And again, the same as with Sharon, make sure that he feels heard. Actually sit down and understand, you know what, the history matters. I've heard people in the past say, let's forget about the history. We need to move on. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you really do. Actually, it's important. If there are people there who were there for a long time, you need to actually understand and take cognizance of what happened in the past. Hear them. Listen to what happened. Why did this not work out? What were the challenges? Let's not repeat those mistakes again. So let him talk about what resource challenges they faced. Were there only 2 people doing the work of 10 people? Did they have a terrible system that they had to work on? You know, what kind of things were they facing? And make sure that that is brought to light and that everybody understands that. So again, make sure that he feels heard. And then to deal with his perfectionism problem, try to get him to understand that you can treat his deliverables as works in progress, so they don't have to be finished and perfect, that you're going to collaborate on these things together. Laura is the compliance officer, so that means she works in legal. How many people have run into problems working with people in legal? Ah, good. I'm so glad to see some hands go up. Laura keeps changing copy in ways that are not customer friendly. She keeps changing things to legalese, and she sees everything in black and white terms. It's either this way or that way. There is no room for compromise. So what's going on? Well, basically what's going on is that Laura is actually doing her job. She's motivated by doing her job well, because her job is to keep the company from being sued. And she has a very narrow focus, and her focus is on that. She sees herself as a champion for compliance. So what you can do in these situations is to speak to her and make clear the distinction between feedback and revisions. So ask for feedback rather than revisions. In other words, she can come to you and say, this word is a problem, or this sentence is a problem, we're going to get sued into the ground because of this word. Not come back with a whole new version of this page or this document, but explain to you why it's a problem, and then you can make the changes. So it's important to get that conversation going, to discuss, but you have to understand what her objections are based on. She has very valid objections. And then also something really important, and this is valid for a lot of these issues, is to make a visible effort to understand the regulatory environment. And a lot of these things come down to making a visible effort to understand the area that other people are working in. And when I say visible, I mean letting them know that you are really trying to understand the work they're doing. Because as content strategists, we do need to work with a lot of different people who are working in a lot of different disciplines. And it's really part of our job to try to understand at least a little bit of the work that they do. Lee is a technical architect, so he works on building software systems. And the problem with Lee is that he doesn't seem to trust you. He doesn't get involved in workshops. He's very quiet. I see some smiles. He seems condescending, And he doesn't answer your questions in detail. You ask him questions about system problems and things that you need to understand, and he gives you kind of vague answers, very high-level answers. The problem is that he's had bad experiences with non-technical people in the past, where they really haven't cared, they haven't valued the work that he's done, and they also haven't understood anything that he's done. So he's naturally developed prejudices against people who do anything that might look like marketing. Right. Oops. So what can you do? One of the biggest things you can do here is demonstrate your technical understanding early. And I didn't say technical knowledge, because I don't necessarily believe that as a content strategist you need to know how to code, or you need to necessarily know a lot about CMSs, but you certainly do need to have technical understanding. You need to have the ability to understand technical concepts. You need to be able to sit down with somebody who is working in these things and have them explain something to you, and you need to be able to grasp it. So, and you should certainly have a basic understanding of technical concepts as far as possible. So demonstrate that early. Speak his language as far as you can. Make an effort to understand some technical things and speak in his terms. This is the thing that I've found most useful when dealing with guys in technical departments, is just the moment that they see I actually understand a little bit of what they're talking about, their attitude changes. Another thing that is really, really helpful is to create clear and useful deliverables for them. That is what they want. They want something that actually is understandable and works. No flowery, pretty things with lots of graphics. Simple, useful deliverables that they can actually put into practice straight away. Something that lines up with the way that they work. And then avoid using too much marketing jargon and buzzwords around them, because that's just going to confirm their prejudices. Saul is a stakeholder from human resources, so he's from another department, right? He's a stakeholder that we brought in because we need to ask him some questions about what they're doing. He's not really directly involved in this project that we're working on, so he doesn't have a direct stake in the actual building of the product, but we need to get information from him. So first off, he's difficult to get hold of. Can't get an appointment to set up a meeting with him. And then when you do get a meeting with him, he's really uncooperative and doesn't open up and answers all your questions with one word, or just says, I don't know, can't help you, sorry, no, I don't know. That's not my department, don't know. And he gets defensive as well when you ask him questions. So what's going on? Well, he's suspicious of the project because he's not part of it. So he's kind of wondering, well, what are these guys actually up to? I don't really know what they're doing, because nobody's actually told him what this project is about. He's just been pulled in, taken out of his normal work and brought in to answer some questions. And he's also afraid a little bit that he doesn't know the answers, that you're going to ask him questions that he can't answer. So what you need to do with him is become his friend, be a pleasant human being, and be open about the project objectives and motives. Make sure that if nobody else has bothered to tell him what this is about, that you do. That you sit down first and explain to him exactly what this is about and why you need to talk to him and what it is that you need from him. That there's nothing funny going on here. You're not trying to undermine their department in any way. You just need some information, and here's why. And reassure him constantly. Also ask him about things that you know that he knows well, so that you can get him comfortable to get information about the other things. All right, so now let's move on to just a few things that you can look out for in general when you're working in organizations. So one of the things that you want to watch for, especially in meetings, is nonverbal cues. These are really, really valuable. So people who are eye rolling, I mentioned that earlier, or sighing a lot in meetings, or you did it right now. Or what was that about? That was a very good demonstration, thank you. Or sitting with their arms folded, or that kind of thing. I knew that was going to make people uncomfortable. I did mean in work meetings, not in this room. It's okay, you can fold your arms. But those things mean something often, and especially if it's repeated, and particularly if you notice that when one person is talking, somebody else always folds their arms. That's usually a sign that there's something going on there between those two people, and you need to figure out what it is. We often joke about how boring meetings are, but you know what? They're actually a goldmine for getting information in the boring parts. If you just sit and keep quiet and watch, observe instead of reading Twitter or Facebook or whatever you would normally be doing, and actually just watch people while everybody else is talking and observe. You can pick up so much that's going on. Look out for an ongoing conflict. So two people who, again, in these workshops and meeting sessions, seem to constantly be going at each other. There's constantly little snarky comments happening between two of them. You want to take that outside, because that is just going to keep on being a problem. And it's going to undermine the project again. So take that away from the group session, get the two of them together or perhaps separate, and try to figure out what is going on there. There must be some kind of history. There's some conflict perhaps between the departments. Perhaps there's a territorial issue in terms of the work that's being done. Somebody feels that somebody else is doing their work, or vice versa. Find out what's going on and make sure that you get them on the same side. The next thing you want to look out for is passions and agendas. Now, passions are good, right? It's good to be passionate about things. But the problem is that they can often derail things, because if somebody is so focused on one thing, it means that they're lacking balance. And balance is critical. So we have to balance, in our work, we have to balance user needs and business objectives, and we have to be always thinking about the constraints that we have to deal with. So resource constraints, financial constraints and so on, time constraints. So we cannot focus on one thing to the exclusion of all other things. And if somebody really is very passionate about a particular area, so perhaps somebody who's extremely focused on usability to the exclusion of everything else, so that they don't understand that there are actually business reasons why perhaps we can't explore this particular area of usability on the website because we don't have the resources for it or whatever. Sometimes there are very valid business reasons why you can't do something, and balance is critical. So you have to watch for those areas of passion as well, so that you can just keep balance in them. Look out for the silent ones, because quiet people can be very dangerous. There are two reasons why people might be silent. Either they're just shy, in which case you could be losing a very valuable resource, because often shy people actually have a lot to contribute and a lot of value, but they feel overwhelmed or daunted by all the stronger personalities in the room, so they don't contribute anything. But actually, if you could get something out of their heads, you might get some really useful stuff. But they could be dangerous, because they could be in a position of power, and they could know that they're in a position of power, and they might just be waiting to change everything. So for instance, a CEO who knows that they're in a position of power, and they don't actually need to say anything right now, because they can wait until the day before the website launches to go in and change all the copy. This is a story that I have heard that has happened. So watch out for people who are quiet, particularly people who are in positions of power and yet don't say anything at meetings, because they probably do have opinions. And at some point, those opinions are going to come out, and possibly not in the way that you want. We spoke about history earlier. History can have a huge impact. You really need to understand the history of a team and an organization, know who has been there for a long time, and who has worked on previous versions of the site and so on, and what have the challenges been in the past, and try to understand those relationships, what has happened in the past and so on. All right, so let's put the pieces together. I said earlier that if there were two things you were going to take away, there was one I mentioned earlier. Well, this is the second one. The second thing is to remember that everyone has their reasons. When you come up against somebody who seems to be being difficult and is constantly raising objections, and you're having trouble dealing with them in a work situation, understand that they probably have their reasons. 95% of the time, people are not being jerks. They actually have their reasons. Maybe somebody's scared of taking responsibility, they're struggling with perfectionism, worried about looking stupid, afraid of being blamed. They have something going on in their life, something in that situation that's causing them to behave in a certain way. And we really need to step back and ask why they're behaving in that way. 90% of solving the people puzzle is, in fact, asking why, not behaving in a reactive way. It's crucial that as content strategists, we understand people's objections and the reasons behind them. So we don't just get angry when people object, but we actually take a step back. We see an objection, and instead of reacting to the objection, we stop, understand the objection, and then respond. Find a useful, constructive way to respond to the objection. Also, not expecting everybody to work the same way that you do is really important. Understanding that people have different work styles. Some people are more productive in the afternoons, not in the morning. And you need to be accommodating and curious about how people work. So it really is just about being a little bit more thoughtful when you're dealing with people. So to close off, when you're dealing with people, put yourself in their shoes and get into their head. Deal with them in a more considered and considerate way. Be thoughtful in your interactions, and be just as empathic with your team members and your stakeholders as you are with your users and your readers. Thank you.